Good morning, world of readers. I am Book Dragon Erin, your favorite booktuber of all time, or at least I would be honored to be your favorite booktuber of all time. In today's video, instead of a review, I will be talking about all of my sci-fi paperbacks and hardcover novels, not including the 300 plus I have on my Kindle, of which there are so many that if I was talking about them extensively, just the Kindle ebooks, we would already be here for like 6 hours. And I'm not going to waste your time doing that, so I'm just going to have this 15-minute video of all of my paperbacks and hardcovers of the sci-fi genre. The first book we have is Quarantine by Lex Thomas. This is one of my favorite sci-fi high school novels of all time. I read this back during quarantine, which is really funny considering the entire series is the Quarantine series. I just love this book. I love how Lex Thomas is a pseudonym for two authors who were working together on this series, and I highly recommend at least the first two books, because after that, the series pretty much goes downhill for me, in my personal opinion, which is very unfortunate because I do love everything sci-fi. Next up, we have The Saints by Lex Thomas. The magic of this sci-fi series really dies after this book, because in the first book, David leaves the end of the book, and then this book, Will leaves the end of the book, leaving Lucy alone in the third book, and then the fourth book, it's just WTF. Next up, we have Quarantine the Burnouts, and then we have Quarantine the Giant. I think it's really weird how Lucy loved David, then gave her V-card to his little brother Will, and then when David came back into the picture, she had twins with David, with no mention of Will anywhere. So that, even though it's not incestuous at all, it's still really weird. One girl being with two brothers within a month time span. I was so grossed out by that it killed the mood of the series for me. Next up, we have Plagueland by Alex Scarrow, Plagueland Reborn, and then we have Plagueland No Escape. And then moving on to Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Next, we have Jamina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff again. And then finishing off the trilogy, we have Obsidio. If Star Trek is my favorite sci-fi thing ever, then the Gone series by Michael Grant is my second favorite sci-fi anything. I am serious. This book is basically the Lord of the Flies meets the X-Men, although it could also be if Stephen King wrote The Lord of the Flies, then it would sort of be like the Gone series. And I seriously wish that this series has way more attention and fans and lovers of the series than it already does. And I am dying for a TV show adaptation of this entire Gone series. It is amazing. After that, we have its sequel, Hunger. Then we have Lies. As you can see, I really annotated this book with a bunch of sticky notes talking about my favorite quotes and when characters died, and I just went ballistic with this, and in the rest of the series, it's that way too. After Gone, Hunger, and Lies, we have Plague, Fear, and Light. After Gone, Hunger, Lies, Plague, Fear, and Light, we have the sequel trilogy in hardcover edition, which I am so proud of. We have Monster, Villain, and Hero. Continuing this list, we have No Safety in Numbers by Dana Lawrence. This book has a really interesting plot, in my opinion. Think anthrax released in a mall on complete shutdown with little hope of escape and people forming gangs to survive. This series, it's a trilogy, and it is so worth reading. I blew through this book within a day or two, and I seriously wish that there was more of this because I love this series so much. It isn't technically a favorite series, but I still really do love it. Next, we have its sequel, No Easy Way Out. And unfortunately, I do not have the third book in the trilogy, but I am going to see if it's available on the Kindle store and then read that too, and finish up with this series as a whole. Moving on, we have Monument 14 by Emmy Laybourne. This series is about teens riding a bus which crashes into a mall during a freakish storm that ends up killing people and stranding others amid this post-apocalyptic world that was once called Earth. Monument 14, Sky on Fire, and Monument 14, Savage Drift. Next up, we have The Maze Runner, which I actually took a while getting into because I was going through another one of those phases where I would only read books where these plots were not really known about. So reading a very mainstream novel was really difficult at the time. So I don't think I actually gave this book a fair review at first, so I'm definitely going to reread this eventually and then give my thoughts and opinions later on my channel. Moving on, we have Matched by Ali Condi, Crossed, and Reached. Then we have The 100 by Cass Morgan. Moving on to a series that I really wish I loved even more than I already do, we have The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This is a post-apocalyptic alien invasion trilogy that I was obsessed with when the movie first came out, and I tried reading this book and I got maybe halfway through the entire book, and then I set it aside for some reason because my ADHD was acting up and I couldn't focus solely on one book. So that was just set aside for a while, and it's so embarrassing to say that I don't even remember any of the plot here, and I seriously need to reread this entire series because, you know, that's how I operate. Next up, we have its sequel, The Infinite Sea, and the only hardcover that is a signed copy, we have The Last Star. Next up, we have Downworld by Rebecca Phelps. This book is one of my Wattpad sensation novels, which was originally written on a website for unpublished authors, and I really did enjoy what I read on Wattpad, so I figured I might as well get the book, because I do love having physical copies of books, even though I have more than 700 Kindle ebooks. Then we have H2O by Virginia Bergen, and then we have The End by Mats Strandberg. This author is basically the European equivalent of Stephen King in the young adult sense, and when I heard that, as a huge Stephen King fan, I knew I had to get this book, and I read about 50 pages in before letting the book slip my mind because I was traveling at the time and I completely forgot to take this book with me, so I had to reread it all over again because I had completely forgotten the entire plot and what happened mid-trip. So the next time I go traveling, I am not forgetting this book, even though I have already read it. Next up, we have The Electric Kingdom by David Arnold, which is one of my favorite young adult sci-fi novels of all time. I loved the concept of this book. The character development was awesome. And at the end, which is really bittersweet, we find out that the end of your life isn't actually the end. It's a new beginning before you head on into the other realms of life and death. It is so fascinating. I could not put this book down. It is on my list of favorite books of all time, and I implore you guys to read it. Next up, we have The Paladin Prophecy by Mark Frost. And then I have its sequel, The Alliance, again by Mark Frost. And I really love this cover. And then I have The Vanishing Deep by Astrid Schulte. I know virtually nothing about this book, but I do have Four Dead Queens, also by Astrid Schulte, and I loved that book, so I knew I had to get this sci-fi novel, since she is a sci-fi fantasy author, and I love her work, so why shouldn't I love this book too? The next 4 books I will talk about in a rapid succession. We have Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. Next up, I have Volume 1 of Battle Angel Alita Last Order Omnibus 1 by Yukito Kishiro. Even though I do love anime shows that I judge based on their artwork, I don't usually read manga comics, but my dad bought me the first few omnibuses as a birthday present for me last year, so I knew I had to read them. So again, I have Battle Angel Alita Omnibus 1, Omnibus 2, and Omnibus 3. Next up, I have Feed by Mira Grant. Then I have its sequel, Deadline. And finishing off the entire trilogy, we have Blackout. I also have World War Z by Max Brooks. My mom and I love the movie adaptation so much that we actually decided to get World War Z, the book, at the same time. So when we came home, both from different bookstores, we both said, hey, I have a present for you. So I pulled out this book for my mom, and she pulled out the book for me, and we're like, oh, my goodness, we got the same thing. So my mom brought the book back, we got a different book, and then we both devoured this book. Then I have The Silence by Tim Levin. This is the book that inspired The Silence, the Netflix movie, and I loved that. And the cool thing about this book, even cooler than the movie itself, was that this book mentioned Mammoth Cave, and I have an obsession with Mammoth Cave. I even went caving in 2017 at Mammoth Cave, where these hearing sensory creatures lived. They lived in the depths of Mammoth Cave and in caves all around the world. And so when I read that this book mentioned Mammoth Cave, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was there. I didn't see any of the sci-fi creatures though. Continuing with places I've been to, we have Coldbrook by Tim Levin. No, I have not been in the scientific facility that started a portal to an undead world that brought the zombies to this world. I actually have been all along the Appalachian Trail several times in my life because I am a very avid hiker, and this sci-fi facility is in the Appalachian Trail really far in, and I have been really far in, so where I can guess the book takes place, I can gather I have been in a setting like that before, and just the fact that this is a zombie novel that started in the Appalachian Trail. I live on the eastern side of the Appalachian Trail, so this book is very near and dear to my heart, even though I can't get through the book in one entire sitting. Where would I be without mentioning a Darcy Coates novel, who is my favorite author of all time? I have Parasite. Parasite is one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. Not to mention, Darcy Coates is my favorite author of all time. She is the Australian equivalent to Stephen King, but she gives all characters deserving a happily ever after and wows me every single time I decide to read one of her books. This book has several parts to it and several points of view from different characters, and it all wraps up so well together that I seriously wish this book had a whole TV show adaptation with everything and more in details and just everything. I love it so much. If Star Trek is up here as the top tier of my sci-fi obsession, Parasite would be around here, The Walking Dead would be here, and then everything else would be just beneath that. But this book, oh my gosh, holy stars, I loved this book. I can't wait to reread it over and over and over again in the coming years. Next I have We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. Forgive me if I do not know how to pronounce his last name. I honestly can't pronounce this young adult sci-fi author's name. This book is about a bunch of teenagers who come from different social circles. They come together at the end of the world when an asteroid is coming to destroy the planet, and they decide what is really important in their lives, whether it's the brainiacs, perfect grades, or the star athlete being the best of the best on his football team, or the photography nerd who secretly is in love with the Mr. Sporty guy. This book is just so good, and it even has a soundtrack on YouTube, which the author Tommy Wallach put together. It was so good. I really, really wish this was a movie. Second to last, we have Switch by A.S. King, which I know is a pseudonym because A.S. King put it all together asking, what are you asking in this novel? What are all the details of these boxes that you're asking about? I just love this book, although it does take a little while to get into because of all these different time slots. I'm not sure how otherwise to explain it, but it's really strangely written, but it works well together in its own. And then finally, I have Nemesis by Brendan Reeks. If you think all 52 sci-fi books is a lot, you should see the vast collection of sci-fi books I have on my Kindle. Going further into my sci-fi world beyond the camera, I have an extensive and rare collection of Star Trek paperbacks in my collection, and I am so proud of it. So when quarantine first happened, my parents and brother and I binge watched all the Star Trek episodes, all the Star Wars movies, geeked out with popcorn and iced tea and coffee, and I spent every single day watching Star Trek with my family, and then I spent every single night reading all my Star Trek paperbacks until I got tired and couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. So I would actually love to know what sci-fi books you love best and why. So feel free to comment below and have a discussion with me. I would love to debate you guys on which is better, Star Trek or Star Wars. But I will tell you that it is a war that I am too stubborn to let go of. So I can go on and on and on for hours on end. So if you want to try me, go ahead. I love that. I'm not even angry about it. It is just so funny to talk about. Anyway, that's about it for today, so if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button to show some support, subscribe to my booktube channel to get more videos like this, turn on that notification button to be notified when I upload brand new videos every single Sunday. Keep on reading and have a great day, everyone!